Okay, brilliant. Well, welcome to another Wellness Lifestyle Conference interview. And good morning, good evening, or good night, depending on where you are in the world. And we are very blessed to have Ilene here with us, who is affectionately known as the Heart Healer. Now, some of you might remember Ilene from a show that we did back in February of this year. Um, And I'm very blessed that this time around I get to hear a bit more about Eileen's backstory, because it's always interesting to hear how people got to where they are today. Like, were there any big defining moments?
Mm.
So, Eileen, that's actually a perfect place to start. I do know that you come from a nursing background,
Mhm.
but what was sort of your journey? Were there any big turning points that made you go, you know what, I want to go in a slightly different direction with this?
It's funny. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share with you, Stefan. And it's been a ride, to say the least, right? My background's in nursing, and I'm one of those people that as a child, I was the one wearing the nurse's uniform for the Halloween costume. I
Oh,
don't
wow.
know if Halloween is celebrated in your culture, but here in the United States, it is an annual gathering
Mm,
of costumes and masks and everything else. And as a
yes.
child, that was my costume, right? And
Yes.
I've always known that I wanted to be a nurse. My mom was a nurse, my sister's a nurse. We all chose different pathways. And I've had
Hmm.
three distinctly separate nursing careers, all different expressions of nursing, including the one that I express now. The first was clinical nursing, more oriented towards children starting adolescent, ages 8 to 18, at a specialty children's hospital. And then it expanded to women and children. And then my whole career shifted when I moved to Florida. And I worked as a nurse legal assistant for a mid-sized law firm that did healthcare law. In our country, medical malpractice defense work. So we represented healthcare practitioners.
Mm.
And while I was working there, as I look back on it, I can remember, even as a child, I'm an empath, right? So I feel other people's feelings, and I'm an intuit. So I have a sense of knowing and wisdom. And all that got shut down when I was a kid, because the environment that I was growing up in was very challenging for a sensitive person like I was. And starting in 1985, which was the time of the harmonic convergence, one of the biggest ones, which
Mm.
awakened a lot of people to their spiritual connection, however they define it, right? When I look back, I realized that there were certain moments of awakening to a different way of looking at things, rather than
Mm.
left-brained allopathic medical model. And in the 1990s, 1993, I was introduced to a wonderful woman who was a psychic and a healer, and she was my person. She was my person that, through the process that she worked with back then, although she is in spirit now, allowed me to awaken to my full connection to source. And from that point on, life was divinely guided with consciousness. Does that make sense? How I'm
Yes, it
Yeah.
does.
So it's been a crazy time, because it was right after that I took my first energy healing course, which was Healing Touch, the Healing Touch program way back then. And it's only grown since then. So I have been my third hat as a nurse, because there is a nursing diagnosis called energy field disturbance. And so I am fully expressed as a nurse, doing all that I do that is energy oriented. So that involves healing
Wow.
work and doing Akashic Records readings, aromatherapy, emotional clearing, the whole nine
Mm.
yards, and it's been a joy. So I do this all expressed through a private practice called Vibrational Healing Through the Heart Incorporated.
Fantastic. Wow, this is so incredible. And I must say, I deeply resonated with when you were saying consciousness being guided by the divine, because that's very much, I think, what does happen for those who are light and shadow workers. You know, they suddenly start to get this tug in a certain direction that they can't say no to. And if they try, well, spirit does kind of go, okay, I'm going to give you slightly more of a wake-up call until you actually hear this, because it's work that needs to be done. Ilene, you said some interesting things there, though, that I want to dive a little bit deeper into. And please forgive me, because these interviews are usually more focused on the personal lives of the interviewees. But the work that you're doing is just so incredible. You were talking about working with a person's Akashic records, as well as their heart, healing their heart using that as well. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about that and what that experience is like, what a person can expect?
It would be my joy to do so, and I'll be able to tie in the intention, which is set to get more personal than more professional, because you can't separate the two when you do this kind of work. And so most of the people that I work with they're mostly women, but I'll work with anyone that resonates with my energy, and that there is a connection that someone feels drawn to. Emotional clearing work has really been at the core of how I've served. And so because I was a child that was exposed to a lot of abuse, both physical and emotional, when I was unable to defend myself, shall we say, that was the reason why I shut down all of my gifts, you know, my divine gifts of empathy and intuition, because it was so challenging. And so because we are who we are, and everything is energy, and we attract unknowingly exactly what it is that we are reflecting out into the world. The majority of clients that I worked with in the beginning were people that had experienced horrific abuse. As a nurse, it was even surprising to me. And in the beginning, I was so shocked that these were the kind of people that were drawn to me. And it was largely because people would go through the traditional forms of therapy and those different types of traditional modalities, and they would plateau. And they would still be suffering, and they were looking for something different. And that's how people came to me, largely word of mouth referral, because I didn't advertise. It just wasn't something that I did. And so my business has been built upon primarily word of mouth referral. And so the kinds of issues that people were having were self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence, challenges with feeling comfortable in their skin, if in their body, right? Because anyone who's experienced trauma can relate, because everybody has, that when we're in that experience of trauma, no matter how small or big it is, we tend to disconnect from our bodies to some degree. And when we're not grounded in this human experience in our bodies, it affects how we are in relationship with ourselves and our world. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, so the type of work has changed, meaning the types of processes that I offer has changed through the years. It's 26 years. It's a very long time to be in this field. I feel blessed because of my nursing background. I've always seen myself as a bridge between the traditional and the non-traditional ways of healing, right? It's helped a lot of people kind of make that leap, knowing that I am a nurse, because I have an understanding of that mainstream way of dealing with whatever the issue is, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. And I love to look at everything holistically, because to me, when all those aspects of who we are in balance, we feel fabulous,
Yes.
right? So that's a huge core component. Although it's not always conscious, it's woven into everything that I do, right? So Akashic Records readings kind of were grown out of waking up to my multidimensional connection. I started really being a hands-on facilitator of healing using aromatherapy and my hands, right? You know, just channeling energy, working with the energy field. And it was mostly in person back in the beginning. And for people that came to me, as I said, that were experiencing trauma, we did a lot of past life regression work because the energy was so dense back then that was a core technique that a lot of practitioners used to get to the root cause.
Yes.
It's not necessary anymore. It's available, but because the energy has changed so much on the planet, it's not necessary anymore. There are much less dense and different ways of clearing energy, one of which is Ho'oponopono, which I actually spoke about at the February conference. And that brings the personal part of it to a circle closure for me as I'm sharing with you. Ho'oponopono came into my life, and I teach this to every client that's willing to learn it, because for me, I had been doing this practice for over 10 years, but only within the context of a healing session. And not because I never studied it. Well, it came to me in 2018 as a means of study. And I always pay attention to what comes in front of me, because it's just how I need to live my life, right? I always value that. And so that was my tool that helped me to heal my PTSD and shift my relationship with my mother, who at that time was still in a body. And so as a result of that, I was able to heal my childhood trauma and my relationship with my mother and have a 1.5 years of a quality relationship with her. And so I'm passionate about this because it's created such a significant shift in who I am and in my relationships, how I do my business, how I live my life. So it's been a ride, to say the least.
Wow. Please give me a moment, because that was a lot for me. And wow. Okay, where do I start? So
take a moment and breathe, just take a moment and breathe. Because you're as sensitive as well, I sense. And so, just breathing into your heart and out of it helps you to kind of disconnect from the emotion of it for a moment, center, and then follow your guidance as you are beautifully following.
thank you. So as I actually just did that as you were instructing me on what to do, because it's interesting that when and for our listeners who don't know this, but there were some scheduling issues around getting this interview on the books. And there was something that said to me, this one's going to be really important.
Oh.
And I sense not just for the people out there, but also for myself. And when you brought up Akashic Records, the first thing that sort of flashed across my mind was, Stefan, you've been wanting to access yours, but you have deep blocks that are preventing you from doing that. And that was why I said, that's really resonating. I want to hear more about this. And without me even, nudging, you then went into the Ho'oponopono and how it helped you heal your relationship with your mother. And I have severe emotional blocks with my own parents that I have been wanting to heal.
I love it.
So it's just really interesting to really interesting to hear that this is the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I recommend anybody who's watching this interview now to please go back and watch Ilene's previous talk on the conference on this as well. And also tune into the next one on August the 14th, of course.
Thank you.
But this is just so incredible how, and actually right at the outset, we were talking about being divinely guided,
Indeed.
And that's exactly, yeah, please continue.
One of the things that you and your audience might find interesting is when we talk about childhood trauma or challenges with our family of origin, shall we say, those relationships. I was guided years ago to create, and it is a signature program or process that I offer called Inner Child Integration. And if you Google that, there will be many different processes that will come up, some that are more psychology oriented. This is a very divinely guided process that is offered as a guided meditation. It is facilitated. It's a facilitated meditation, and it is a way to receive information without reliving trauma from our children that experienced the trauma, because we didn't as adults. It's our child at different ages that experience the trauma. And being able to have a chat with that child and hear what their experience was can be very healing and very eye-opening, and then bringing them into the heart center where they go for the rest of your human experience with you shifts tremendously our reactivity in certain situations. Because the goal for a healthy relationship with ourselves and others is to always be, to the greatest extent that we can, I think you'll agree, to be present, mindful, and to respond rather than react.
Yes.
But we can't always choose. Sometimes we find that out our mouth comes that reactive comment or statement, right? And you want to just bring it right back again because it's not going to be productive, right?
Right.
But the truth is that the adult in us is not the one reacting. It's the child that experienced a trauma that was being triggered by whatever is the experience that we're in the middle of. And so the less reactive we can be, the more loving, the more balanced our relationships can be with ourselves and with those that we choose to communicate with, whether it's family, friends, clients, neighbors, it doesn't matter. Everything in this realm is about being in relationship to something or someone. It's how we learn.
How we learn. Absolutely.
Makes sense? Yeah.
It does, yes. And I sense that, talking about my own sort of issues, I guess we'd call them. As you were saying all of that, I was getting some interesting sensations coming through. And one was because my trauma that I experienced is actually fairly recent with my parents.
Okay.
But by the same token, I was like, but hang on, the inner child, because I have had those discussions. And interestingly, I find the child, Stefan, to actually be an incredibly powerful being, very strong-willed, very sure of himself, where adult Stefan is sometimes not quite so sure as, where does he fit in? And yet, when you said that about, traumas being triggered from a child, I'm like, was there maybe trauma that I didn't even realize happened, but it affected me on a soul level? And the answer was a resounding yes.
Absolutely. I have a colleague that's a trauma recovery coach. And she came to that work largely because of a huge trauma, but more not a familial trauma. It was a medical experience. That was her trauma, and it impacted her tremendously. And I heard her speak at a conference that we were both speaking at one time, and she was saying, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm not going to, I never remember her exact language. She got up in front of everyone and said, everyone that has experienced past, anything that hasn't felt good in any time in your life, move over to this side of the room. Well, you know that's everybody.
Right.
And so a trauma is really defined as something that doesn't feel good. So we all experienced traumas. But childhood trauma, although it affects us very similarly to adult trauma, childhood trauma is an interesting dynamic. But the end result, as I say, can be very similar. The beauty of the Akashic records and you being able to access them, right? Having an Akashic records reading gives you the wisdom and understanding for why you are blocking it, if in fact you truly are. I had a colleague who's an extraordinary psychic. One day we're having a phone conversation and he said, Ilene, I want to pay you to teach me how to do the, access the Akashic records. And it was by phone. I wish I could have seen him and he could have seen my face, and I'm going, are you kidding me? I said, accessing the Akashic records, you're already an extraordinary psychic, right? It's by intention that you are asking for that wisdom to come from that place, right?
Absolutely.
So I think many people access their records without knowing that they're doing it, that is where the wisdom is coming from, because they didn't know that that's all that it really takes when you're already an adept psychic or intuitive.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I know from, personal experience, before I really realized that it was the Akashic records or anything like that, and my guides sort of said to me, this is as much as we're allowing you to see because you're not ready for the rest yet. And I just went, okay, I'll take the advice, I guess. And I pushed a little bit on one particular thing. I said, I'm ready now. I'm ready to up level and upskill.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my guides turned to me and said, I don't think you are, but I'm willing to let you go through it. But because of the kind of person you are, and she was right, you unfortunately learn through pain. You have not learned how to learn through love as yet. She's like, so this is going to be really painful for you. Is this what you want? And I went, yes, absolutely. Of course I can. I'm a warrior spirit. I can do this. Kind of wish I hadn't have said that. But anywho, here we are. Okay. I'd like to wrap this up with just a little final thought, which is to anybody listening to this right now who is as moved as I am to heal relationships in their lives, please get in touch with Ilene, because I feel like she'll definitely be able to help you in that movement. So for those who are looking to reach out to you, Ilene, how do they do that?
I think the easiest thing to do is go to their phone or their computer and type in Speak with Ilene, ILENE.com. On that page, it's one of the web pages on my website. There is a link to schedule a complimentary heart healer session. And wherever you are in the world, we can find a way to communicate, either by WhatsApp for that session or by Zoom. There is a little form that everyone fills out that helps me to know where they're contacting me from. Figure out the best way to communicate. Usually it's WhatsApp or Zoom if someone is outside the US or Canada or Mexico. That's the easiest way, because a complimentary heart healer session gives me an opportunity to listen to what it is that the potential client is wanting to address. It gives me an opportunity to respond with potential tools or techniques that they can start using right away. And it gives me an opportunity to share with them how they can work with me as a client. So that's probably the easiest way for someone to schedule time with me.
Fantastic. Well, also just for our listeners again, all of Ilene's details are in the description of this video. So if you're catching the replay, whether you're catching on Facebook or LinkedIn, her details are below, as well as the link to speakwithilene.com. And Ilene, it has been an absolute pleasure, as I knew it would be, to speak
My
with you
joy.
today.
My joy, Stefan. A joy to meet you as well. And just a reminder, this is going to be a little bit of a different topic for this conference.
Right. Yes. Thank you for raising that.
We're going to talk about non-toxic living, working with aromatherapy for the home or office, for family, for office, for clients. So I'm going to have a lot of fun with this because I've been working with aromatherapy for over 20 years. So we're going to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely are. So be sure to catch Ilene on the 14th of August. Details for that are on our website and our Facebook. So you'll be able to click through and view Ilene, the Heart Healer. Ilene, thank you so much for spending time.
Man. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.